The most common philosophical objection to an indeterministic notion of free will, by far, comes from the idea that it would be no better than random chance or blind luck. The argument typically begins with the skeptic drawing a dichotomy between an event's being determined and an event's being random, and says that all events must fall into one of these categories. But since indeterminism denies that decisions are determined, then it follows that they must be random. But is a sort of freedom which amounts to nothing more than brute randomness really something worth wanting? Surely indeterminists don't want their decisions to carry no more significance than random quantum events. But if the indeterminist does not want to say that their decisions are random, then they must bite the bullet and accept the other alternative, namely that their decisions are determined. Hence, determinism must be true. As Mark Balaguer explains, for each different conscious decision you've made in your life, we can say for certain that it was either caused by prior events or not caused by prior events. But if a decision was caused by prior events, then it wasn't a product of your free will because it was already determined by things that happened before you chose. And if a decision wasn't caused by prior events, then it wasn't a product of your free will because it happened randomly, and it makes no sense to say that you chose of your own free will if your choice just randomly appeared in your brain. Certainly at first blush this appears to be a false dichotomy. The indeterminist is not likely going to accept that the only options for any decision are that it was determined or that it was random. As Robert Kane argues, the first step is to question the intuitive connection in people's minds between indeterminisms being involved in something and its happening merely as a matter of chance or luck. Chance and luck are terms of ordinary language that carry the meaning of its being out of my control, so using them already begs certain questions. Whereas indeterminism is a technical term that merely rules out deterministic causation, though not causation altogether. Indeterminism is consistent with non-deterministic or probabilistic causation, where the outcome is not inevitable. It is therefore a mistake, in fact one of the most common in debates about free will, to assume that undetermined means uncaused or merely a matter of chance. The theory of free will which I have developed specifies that a decision must be deliberate in order to be free. And so I would propose a third category in addition to determinism and randomness. A decision could be determined, or it could be random, or it could be deliberate. There does not appear to be any obvious problem with saying that free decisions fall into that third category. So it is tempting to just reject this most prominent argument against indeterministic notions of free will as a simple false dichotomy. As Stewart Goetz says, an agent's choice is not random because it is explained teleologically by a reason. Regrettably, philosophical debates are rarely ever settled this easily. The most likely response that the determinist will offer against the idea that deliberate actions are a genuine third option will be to construct a true binary between determinism and randomness. That is to say, they will most likely just define the category of randomness as anything which is not determined. So random just means not determined. Now this is of course a true dichotomy. An event can only be determined or not determined. But if there is a victory for the determinist here, it will ring rather hollow, for the defender of indeterminism will have no problem grasping the second horn of the supposed dilemma in this case. After all, to say that deliberate decisions are merely not determined is what the indeterminist has claimed all along. If the determinist wants to stretch the definition of randomness so thinly that it means nothing more than undetermined, then there is no longer any reason for the indeterminist to reject it. The only reason that the indeterminist originally resisted the idea that free decisions were random was because it was assumed that the word random was being used in the usual sense, where random means without forethought, concern, or intention. Once it has been stipulated that the word random is going to be broad enough to include those concepts, then there are no longer any negative consequences which emerge from saying that a free choice is random in the sense of merely being undetermined. Perhaps a more sophisticated move for the determinist to make would be to challenge the notion that a decision can be deliberate but not determined. To say that a decision is deliberate is to say that it is intentional or based upon some reason. So perhaps the determinist might maintain that if a decision is based upon a reason, then that reason somehow causes or determines which decision is made. But it surely will not work to say that a reason causes a decision, since the relevant sorts of reasons which I am talking about are not causal in nature. For example, if I choose to eat a hamburger rather than a hot dog, this choice might be based upon the fact that I desire a hamburger more than a hot dog. But the determinist hasn't given us any reason to suppose that this desire somehow causes my decision. As Timothy O'Connor argues, it is true that we cannot conceive an agent's causing an event internal to his action without having any inclination toward that action. To that extent, the agent's causing the event depends on the reason he has. Nonetheless, the explanatory power of reasons within an agent-causal framework is not independent of the agent's exercise of active power. The latter provides a necessary link between reason and behavior, without which the reason could not, in any significant way, explain the behavior. It allows the reason to influence the agent's producing the outcome, while not directly and independently causing it. Were nothing to have caused this, then noting that the agent had a reason that motivated acting in that way would not suffice to explain it. Nor is it clear how making a choice based upon a reason would determine that choice, such that the agent categorically could not have done otherwise. I see no logical contradiction involved in saying that an agent could choose one course of action over another based upon some reason, and yet that, up until the time of choosing, the agent retained a categorical ability to follow the other course of action. Reasons can incline us toward a certain course of action without thereby compelling or determining that course of action. As Thad Botham observes, this is a trivial case of reasons inclining without necessitating. Suppose that I'm inclined, moved, and motivated to drink the cup of espresso at the end of dinner. Nonetheless, I freely decide to abstain, freely opting for a glass of milk instead. Prior to the choice of milk over espresso, I have other inclinations and tendencies besides those that favor deciding on espresso. All of my inclinations and desires move me. That is just what properly functioning inclinations and desires do. Moreover, frequently I feel differences in the strength of my inclinations or desires, which push or pull me one way or another. Nonetheless, I might freely act for only some of those reasons. So there does not appear to be any logical constraint according to which basing decisions upon reasons would entail that the decisions are determined or caused by those reasons. So if the determinist wishes to maintain that a decision's being deliberate is not a genuine alternative to it being determined, he owes us an explanation for as to why. In summary, then, the most common philosophical argument against indeterministic free will appears to be predicated upon a false dichotomy between determinism and randomness. It overlooks the third possibility that indeterministic choices may be deliberate. If one makes this a true dichotomy, by simply defining randomness so broadly as to merely mean not determined, then there is no longer any problem for the indeterminist in grasping that second horn of the dilemma. If the determinist tries to argue that a deliberate decision is necessarily a determined decision, then they will owe us a demonstration that there is some sort of logical contradiction involved in holding that a decision can both be deliberate and indeterministic. Unless and until this is done, I conclude that the indeterminist has nothing to fear from this randomness argument.